So we're going to move on to chapter 11. Yeah, chapter 11. So chapter 11 has to do with statistics. So we're starting our statistics unit here. The first part is designing a study. So we need to see what type of study is needed for a certain set of data. So yes, I'm going to talk to you a lot on this front page. So classifying studies. In a statistical study, data is collected and used to answer questions about a population characteristic or parameter. Due to time and money constraints, it may be impractical or impossible to collect data from each member of a population. So say they wanted to do some kind of study on people in the U.S., they're not going to ask everybody. They're going to select a small sample of certain people in order to do that study. Okay, so therefore, in many studies, a sample population is taken, and a measure called a statistic is calculated using the data. The sample statistics, such as the sample mean or sample standard deviation, is then used to make inferences about the population parameter. So the steps in a typical statistical study are shown below. So first, you want to identify the objective of the study. Focus. Next, choose the sample and collect the data. Then organize the data and collect sample statistics. And then make inferences and draw conclusions about that data that you collected. Okay, so to obtain good information and draw accurate conclusions about a population, it is important to select an unbiased sample. Okay, I'm going to highlight bias here. So bias is an error that results in misrepresentation of members of a population. So some people might have a bias against certain samples that you're taking. A poorly chosen sample can cause biased results. To reduce the possibility of selecting a biased sample, a random sample can be taken in which members of the population are selected entirely by chance. Okay? So the following study types can be used to collect sample information. So these ones are what we're kind of dealing with today. So we have to determine what type of study they're talking about. So the first one is a survey. Okay, most of you have taken a survey before, probably. So in a survey, data are collected from responses given by members of a population regarding their characteristics, behaviors, or opinions. So an example of this would be to determine whether the student body likes the new cafeteria menu. The student council asks a random sample of students for their opinion. So they send out like a form, you'd fill it out with your opinion on that subject. Okay, so then our next one is an experiment. Okay, so in an experiment, your sample has to be divided into two groups. So you have an experimental group that undergoes a change and a control group that does not undergo the change. The effect on the experimental group is then compared to the control group. So usually you do something with like a placebo. This one usually has to do with like drug tests and stuff like that. So a restaurant is considering creating meals with chicken instead of beef. They randomly give half of a group of participant meals with chicken and the other half meals with beef, and then they ask how they liked the meals. The last one is an observational study, and it is just what it says, you're observing. Okay, so members of a sample are measured or observed without being affected by the study. An example of this is researchers at an electronics company observe a group of teenagers using different laptops and note their reactions. Okay, so you're just watching and observing instead of giving somebody something to test. Okay, so those are 3 different study types. So if you go to the back here. Are what? Shh. Hey. Example 1, we want to determine whether each situation describes a survey, an experiment, or an observational study. So those are the 3 that we went over on the bottom on the front. Then we want to identify the sample and then suggest the population from which it may have been selected. So there are 3 different things that we have to include in our answer here. So our first one is to determine whether it's a survey, experiment, or observational study. The second thing is to identify the sample. And the third is to suggest the population from which it came from. Okay, so letter A, we have a record label wants to test 3 designs for an album cover. They randomly select 50 teens from local high schools to view the covers while they watch and record their reactions. Okay, so the main part here is they are watching and recording their reactions. Okay, so since they're watching and recording, they're not sending out a form for them to fill out. They didn't say they were getting their opinion on them. They're watching and recording their actions. So that would have to be an observational study. Okay, so that was the first thing we needed. Second thing we needed is to identify the sample. So what was the sample in this given problem?
Record labels.
The sample that they're observing. Who are they observing? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
The 50 teens selected is the sample. Okay, and then the third thing we need is the population from that sample. So what are they trying to aim to do? Or who are they trying to target?
Teens.
Okay, teens, but yes, they're talking to 50 teens from a local high school, but they're looking for purchasers of the album. So you're looking for potential purchasers.
Is this like sound call or something? This is my mixtape.
Okay, so it's why are they conducting this study? It's to target potential purchasers of the album. You can say customers, it's fine. All right, we're going to do the same thing in letter B. So scientists study the behavior of one group of dogs given a new heartworm treatment and another group of dogs, that's supposed to say dogs, given a false treatment or placebo. It is an experiment. Okay, it is an experiment. Some of the dogs are affected by what's happening. Your assignment is literally one-sided. All right, second part that we need is to identify the sample. Okay, so the dog's given the heartworm, sorry. Okay, so what would the population be, what would this be targeting because of this experiment?
Dogs.
Dogs. All dogs.
Dogs are gonna.
I was not kidding. The target is all dogs.
Dogs aren't gonna buy them.
got a point. It's gonna be their owner.
Yeah, it should be targeting the owners. Not
It's-
dogs.
Yeah, because the dog makes it up.
If they're trying to do
No,
something,
what
they're
it's
proving-
doing, it's not talking about purchasing anything. It's talking about, does this heartworm medicine work? So it's targeting all dogs so that it could work on those dogs. It's an experiment for the dogs.
But it's also
It's not talking about them purchasing anything. It's talking about their
in
reactions.
reality,
So last one is service.
It's talking about their reactions given the medication and those given the placebos.
Last one survey.
survey says.
Okay, letter C then. The yearbook committee conducts a study to determine whether students would prefer to have a print yearbook or both print and digital yearbooks. It is a survey.
What? Really?
Okay.
It's like that teacher survey?
Students.
Okay, so what is the sample? It's students that what?
Care about the yearbook. That want digital or whatever yearbook.
It's just students that participated.
Oh,
Yeah, keeper was right.
job keeper. He is a good cookie. You want a cookie? You get a cookie?
Yeah.
You want my cookie?
Okay, and then what is the population then?
Might not like the cookie.
Students, all students.
All students or the student body?
All students.
And they're left off.
So all students is fine.
Yeah, work that thing
Okay, so that's your first type of problem for today.
It's a hard problem.
You have to determine what type of study is being conducted, state the sample, then state the population targeted. Okay? For the next one here, we want to determine when to use a survey, experiment, or observational study. Think about how to use the data or how the data will be obtained and whether or not the participants will be affected by the study. Okay, so first, again, we want to determine whether each situation calls for a survey, experiment, or observational study, and then we want to explain why we chose that. Okay, so we're determining which study to use now. So the first one, a pharmaceutical company wants to test whether a new medicine is effective. It would be an experiment. Okay, they need to see whether somebody is going to have a certain effect and if what effect the placebo has against the other. So the treatment will need to be tested on a sample group. Okay, which means that the members of the sample will be affected by the study. Did say explain, so I'm explaining. Therefore, this situation
That's really, really nice. Right.
calls for an experiment. Okay, so since some of those people in that sample will be affected, okay, you do need to do that experiment with a placebo as your control group. Yeah.
I don't after that.
Statistics is math.
Math.
It's to get data, and you need to find means and standard deviations, but you need to first know how to conduct your study to get the data. Statistics is math.
Then why do we do it?
Because you can do statistics in science too. It's like you can write in math. It's not just in English. You can write in math too. All right. Letter B. We have a research company wants to study smokers and non-smokers to determine whether 10 years of smoking affects. What did I do when I typed this? It's supposed to be lung capacity.
Lunch?
Yep, lung.
I want lunch.
Want McDonald's?
No, Eric.
Are you sure?
Can you go here?
You were the one who said that.
No. All right. Shh. Hey, focus. We're almost done. Okay, so study on smokers and non-smokers to determine their lung capacity over 10 years. It is observational. Okay. That is because the lung capacities of the participants are observed and compared without them being affected by the study. Okay, so they're not affected by the study. You're just observing two different sets of people and taking that data. Okay, then the last one, a national pet chain wants to know whether customers would pay a small annual fee to participate in a rewards program. They randomly select 200 customers and send them questionnaires. Well, if they're sending them questionnaires, what would that be? A survey. Okay, so this calls for a survey. Okay, the data is obtained from opinions given by the members of a sample population. Okay, so when your opinion is needed, you're usually going to do a survey. Okay, if you're seeing if something's effective or not, you're going to do an experiment. And then if you just want to see effects like in that second one there between two different groups, you can just observe both groups and write down that data from each without affecting them. Questions?